called Barren by her village at 38. A widowed rancher's twins arrived 9 months later. The morning I found her, I was trying to save a fence post. That's the whole story, right there if you want the short version. A rotted post on the south pasture line, ground so frozen I'd cracked 2 iron bars trying to drive the replacement in, and the cattle bored enough to lean on the wire like it was something they'd earned. January. The kind of January where the air has a weight to it, comes down on your shoulders like something's pressing. I'd been out there since before light. My fingers had stopped feeling like mine somewhere around the 3rd hour, and I was thinking about nothing except the angle of the post, whether I had it plumb, when I heard the wagon. Heard it before I saw it. One horse moving slow. The trace chains had a loose rattle that said the rig had been on the road a long time. I straightened up and looked. She was up on the box alone. A woman, maybe late 30s, bundled in a coat that had been somebody else's before it was hers, man's coat, too big across the shoulders, dark hair coming loose from its pins. She had the reins gathered in both hands and she was looking straight ahead, the way a person looks when they've made a decision and they're not going to let themselves think about it anymore. She pulled up about 20 feet from me and sat there a moment. The horse blew. She looked at me. "This the Haverfield place," she said. "Was," I said. "Haverfield sold it 8 years ago. I'm Cade Morrow, I own it now." She took that in. Something in her face shifted, not collapse, not panic, just the small rearrangement of a person absorbing one more thing that hasn't gone right. "I see," she said. She didn't ask me anything else, just sat there with the reins in her hands and the pale sky behind her and the horse snorting steam into the cold. I waited. The fence post waited. The cattle on the far side of the wire were watching with that flat bovine patience they have. "You come far," I said finally. "Tolan County," she said, "east side." That was 60, 70 miles. On that rig in January alone, that was 2 days at least, maybe 3. "You looking for work?" I said. "I can cook," she said. "I can mend, preserve, keep accounts. I can turn my hand to most things a ranch needs done inside a house." She said it level, no asking in it, no softness, like she was reading terms off a paper. I looked at her. I looked at the horse which needed water and rest. I looked at the coat. "Come down from there," I said. "I'll put your horse up." Her name was Nora Vass. She'd been a Pemberton before she married, and her husband had died of a lung sickness the previous March. A man named Vass who'd worked a small farm east of Toland, and when he went, the farm went with him, because it turned out the farm had debts she hadn't known about, and the debts had a creditor who moved faster than grief. She told me this that evening at the kitchen table, plain and matter-of-fact, while she ate the soup I'd heated. Not looking for sympathy, just laying out the facts the way you describe a road condition to someone who needed to know what they were riding into. I told her she could have the small room off the back hall. My housekeeper, Ora, had used it until Ora's daughter in Salinas needed her. It had an iron bedstead and a window that looked out over the dry creek bed and a nail on the back of the door for a coat. "I'll pay fair wages," I said. "I know what fair wages are," she said. She went to bed. I sat at the table a while longer with the lamp turned low, listening to the wind work at the corners of the house. The ranch was quiet in the way it had been quiet for 3 years since my wife Clara died. Not peaceful quiet, the other kind. I want to tell you what the next 2 months looked like, because if I skip it, you won't understand what came after. Nora Vass worked. That's the simplest way to say it. She worked the way some people pray, steadily, without fanfare, without needing anyone to see it. She had the kitchen in order inside a week. She found a system for the linen that Ora had never arrived at. She kept accounts in a hand so clean I could read the ledger without squinting for the first time in years. She put up preserves from a root cellar I'd halfway given up on, and she fixed the loose hinge on the springhouse door that had been squeaking since the previous summer, and that I'd been meaning to get to and hadn't. She didn't talk much, neither did I. We developed a kind of working silence, the kind two people find when they've both had enough noise in their lives and know the value of a room where nobody's performing. She was 38. I knew because she told me when she arrived, not volunteering it exactly, but when I asked her age for the wage record she said it without hesitation, the way a person does who's past caring what it sounds like. I was 47. I didn't tell her that. She probably worked it out. What I noticed in those 2 months were small things. The way she stood at the kitchen window in the mornings looking out at the pasture, not dreaming exactly, just looking, with a mug of coffee in both hands and her elbows on the sill. The set of her jaw when something was heavier than it ought to be and she was going to move it anyway. The fact that she laughed once at the rooster, which had a habit of standing on the porch rail and screaming at nothing in particular, a short, surprised laugh, like she'd forgotten she could do that. I did not let myself think about her in any particular way. I was a rancher who needed help. She was a woman who needed work. That was the whole of it. I believed that until March. March came in cold and then turned mean about the second week. We got an ice storm that took out the big cottonwood on the north end of the yard. It came down across the fence line and into the near pasture. And then the creek that ran through the east quarter rose 3 feet in 2 days and threatened the lower hay sheds. I was up for 36 hours straight, moving hay, shoring the shed floor, trying to save what I could. Hector, my hand, was down with a fever. The other man I kept, a younger fellow named Prine, was good with cattle but lost in a flood situation. He did what I told him and no more. Nora worked beside me. Not helping, working. She's the one who thought to pull the tack up from the lower storage to the house before the water reached it. She's the one who improvised a levee on the east side of the near shed with feed sacks and creek mud, which slowed the water enough that we got the last of the loose hay onto the wagon. She worked in water up to her knees in the dark with a lantern in one hand and a grain sack in the other, and she didn't once ask how much longer or suggest that we ought to give up on something. When it was over, when we'd done what we could and the water was cresting and there was nothing left but to wait, we were standing in the yard in the gray early morning, both of us soaked through, mud from ankle to knee. Prine had gone to bed. The water was still moving but slower. She was looking at the creek. I said, "You didn't have to do that." She turned and looked at me. Her hair was plastered to her forehead. There was a streak of mud along her jaw. "Yes, I did," she said. And that was it. That was the whole of it. She went inside. I stood in the yard a while longer, the water smell heavy in the cold air, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not love, not yet. Something before love. The recognition of a person who is present in a way that costs them something, and who chooses it anyway. I need to tell you what the county thought of me by that point, because it matters. My nearest neighbor to the west was a man named Galt, Harmon Galt. He had more land than I did and less debt, and he had the kind of confidence that comes from having never been seriously wrong about anything in his own mind. He'd made an offer on the Haverfield place, my place, before I got it, and he'd lost it to me on price, and he'd held that against me quietly and steadily for 8 years, the way a certain kind of man holds a grudge, not loudly, but permanently. When Clara died, Galt made a point of mentioning to anyone who'd listened that I'd been slow to call the doctor. That was a lie. I'd ridden for the doctor myself, 12 miles in the dark. But lies travel faster than correction, and in a county where people have long winters and short memories for facts, it had stuck. By the time Nora arrived, the word on Cade Morrow was, "Good man maybe, but hard luck follows him. His wife gone, his land mortgaged, his cattle numbers down, a man who works hard and gets less for it every year." The kind of man you feel sorry for from a distance. What they didn't know, what Galt had been careful to obscure, was that I'd spent the previous 2 years quietly paying down that mortgage. Methodically. I knew what I had, I knew what I owed, and I'd been working toward a number. I was close. Not there yet, but close. None of that was visible from the road. April, the mud dried. The creek went back to its bed. The cottonwood got sawn up and stacked and was going to make the best firewood I'd had in years. Galt came by the third week of April. He came on a Sunday, which was deliberate. That's when you call on a rancher when you want to catch him without an excuse to be elsewhere. He rode up to the house on his good horse with his good hat and his good coat, and he tied up at the post and knocked. Nara opened the door. I saw his face shift. He hadn't known there was a woman at my place. The county gossip hadn't carried that far yet, or he hadn't been listening. I came up behind her. We stood in the doorway. "Morrow," he said, tipping his hat. He looked at Nora. "Ma'am." We sat on the porch. Nora went inside. Galt had a proposal which was, as it always is with a man like Galt, not really a proposal at all. He wanted to buy my east quarter, the one with the creek. He named a price that was about 60 cents on the dollar. "That's not what it's worth," I said. "Land's not worth what a man hopes," he said. "Land's worth what a man can pay for it." "Then I'll wait," I said. He smiled. It was the smile of a man who knows something you don't. "Heard about the flooding," he said. "Heard you lost most of your lower hay." "I saved most of my lower hay," I said. "That's not what I heard." "Then you heard wrong." He left. I sat on the porch after he rode out, watching the dust settle on the road. The anger in me was old and familiar. I'd felt it before. It sat in my chest like a stone I'd learned to carry. The screen door opened, and Nora came out with 2 mugs. She sat in the other chair and handed me one. We didn't talk for a while. The afternoon was warm for April, the pasture grass coming up green in the low places. "He wants your creek quarter," she said. "Yes. He thinks you're going to have to sell. He's been thinking that for a while." She looked out at the pasture. "How close are you to the mortgage?" I looked at her. It wasn't the kind of question a housekeeper asks. She met my eyes and didn't look away. 14 months, I said. Maybe 12 if the summer's good. She nodded slowly. Then 12 months, she said, a good summer. I didn't know then what she meant by that exactly. I know now. But at the time I just sat there with my coffee and the April air coming off the pasture and felt something loosen in my chest, just slightly, at having someone say a straight thing about a hard situation without flinching from it. It happened the way things happen when they've been building, without either person naming it. It was late May. I'd been in the East Quarter since morning, checking the creek bank damage from the spring rise, deciding what needed reinforcing before next year. I came back at dusk to find the lamp already lit in the kitchen, and the smell of something good on the stove, and Nora sitting at the table with the account ledger open and a pencil in her hand. She'd been working on the accounts. She did this sometimes in the evenings, unasked, looking for places I could save, tracking the cattle numbers against the feed costs, the kind of patient arithmetic most men hire out, but that she did the way she did everything, because it needed doing. She looked up when I came in. There was something in her face that was different that evening. I couldn't have told you what exactly. A kind of openness, maybe, a stillness that wasn't guarded. "Sit down," she said. "I want to show you something." I sat. She turned the ledger toward me and pointed. She'd found a hay supplier 40 miles south who'd undercut my current supplier by a margin that, over a year, amounted to nearly 2 months of mortgage payments. "I wrote to him 3 weeks ago," she said. "I got his reply today. He'll hold the rate through winter if you commit before June." I looked at the numbers, then I looked at her. "You did this yourself," I said. "I had the time," she said. "Nora." "It's not a gift," she said. "It's just arithmetic." I don't know why that was the moment. Maybe because she said it's not a gift, because she wasn't trying to give me anything, wasn't being kind in that way that makes a man feel pitied. She was just present, useful, alongside me. I put my hand over hers on the table, just that, left it there. She looked down at my hand. Then she turned hers over slow, and her fingers closed around mine, and she let out a breath that had been held a long time. I want to be honest about something here. There were people in this county who thought well of Nora and people who didn't, and the ones who didn't had a reason that had nothing to do with her character. She'd been married 6 years to Vass, and in those 6 years there had been no children. In the kind of farming community she'd come from, tight, church-going, long-memoried, that meant something to people. Not to everyone, but to enough of them. The women who whispered over quilts and the men who said things sideways over fence lines. The kind of talk that doesn't say anything straight out but accumulates. She told me about it in March, the night after the flood, when we were both too tired to keep anything held back. Sitting at the kitchen table with the mud still drying on our boots, not really talking about anything in particular, and then she said it plainly, the way she said most things. They called me Barren, she said. Back in Toland, not to my face mostly, but you hear it anyway. I looked at her. 6 years, she said, nothing. And then Vass died, and there was nothing left of that life anyway. I didn't say anything useless like I'm sorry or that's not right. I said, do you believe them? She was quiet a moment. I believed I was unlucky, she said, which isn't the same thing, I know, but it felt the same. I nodded. I don't think I'm cursed, she said. I think I was just with the wrong man in the wrong life. She said it without bitterness, just accurate. I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. We sat there with the lamp burning and the sound of the creek running high outside, and it was enough. The thing about Galt is he didn't stop. In June he started a new line of talk. Now that there was a woman at my place, the story became something else. A widower and a widow, both without prospects, making a practical arrangement. That was the charitable version. Galt's version involved words I won't repeat. I heard about it from Hector, who'd recovered from his fever and was back to working, and who had relatives in town who reported what they heard. I went to see Galt. It was a Tuesday morning. I rode to his place and found him at his barn, and I didn't say anything elaborate. I told him what I'd heard, and I told him to stop it. I told him if I heard it again, I would make it my particular business to ensure every man in the county knew the true state of his offer on my east quarter and what he'd hoped to do with that land. And I'd do it publicly, at the feed store, where the whole county could listen. He looked at me for a long moment. You're mighty fired up for a man whose best days are behind him, he said. My best days, I said, are in front of me. I rode home. I don't know if I believed it when I said it, but I believed it more than I had before I said it. Nora was in the yard when I got back, hanging washing. She watched me come in and put up the horse. She didn't ask where I'd been. At supper, she said, Hector told me. I handled it, I said. She looked at me across the table, that long, direct look she had. I know you did, she said. We married in July. No ceremony to speak of, magistrate felled in town. 2 witnesses from the church who'd known Clara and wished me well. A plain dress that Nora had made herself. A ring that had been my grandmother's and that fit her hand like it had been waiting. Walking out of the magistrate's office, she took my arm. Just that. Took my arm in the July heat with the dust in the street and the smell of the livery coming from down the block. Well, she said. Well, I said. We drove home. That night I lay awake a while with her asleep beside me and the window open and the warm dark coming in, and I thought about the years between Clara and this. 3 years of the wrong kind of quiet, working toward a number on a ledger without any particular reason to get there. The way mornings had felt like something to be gotten through rather than started. I hadn't told anyone that, hadn't said it even to myself exactly, but it was true. I fell asleep with her shoulder against mine and the summer air moving through the curtains, And the last thing I thought was that I hadn't known I was that tired until I wasn't anymore. The summer was good. The cattle came up well. Hector's brother came on part-time in August and proved useful. The hay yield was better than the previous 2 years combined, and the new supplier came through at the agreed rate. I ran the numbers in September and found I was 8 months from clear, not 12, not 14. 8. I told Nora over supper. She put her fork down. She looked at me. 8, she said. Barring a hard winter, I said. She was quiet a moment. Then she said, I have something to tell you. I looked at her. She was looking at the table and then she looked up. I'm with child, she said. The kitchen was very still. The lamp on the table. The window showing the last blue light of the September evening. Are you sure? I said. I'm sure, she said. I've been sure for about a month. I waited because she stopped, started again. I didn't know how you'd take it. How I'd take it, I said. It's a lot, she said. We haven't been married 3 months. I stood up. I came around the table. I went down on one knee beside her chair, not dramatically, not like anything, just to be at her level. I took both her hands. Nora, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were wet, and she was angry about that. I could see it, the tightening at the corners. A woman who doesn't cry in front of people if she can help it. I'm glad, I said. You hear me? I'm glad. She let out a breath. Hector's going to be insufferable about the timing, she said. I laughed, actually laughed, the real kind that comes up from the chest and doesn't ask permission. She laughed too, a little, still holding my hands, still with those eyes. November, the kind of November that makes you count your wood and count it again. I was in the near pasture replacing a section of wire. Some things are always the same. When Hector came riding fast from the direction of the house. Riding fast meant something from Hector. He didn't ride fast for minor things. He pulled up. Doc says you better come, he said. I want to tell you the next part carefully, because it matters and because I don't want to overdress it. Nora had gone into labor early, 5 weeks early, Doc Reser told me, which he said with a calm that I found both reassuring and terrifying. I got to the house, and Doc was there already. Hector's wife Alina in the kitchen boiling water. Everything arranged with the competent urgency of people who know what they're doing. Doc met me at the bedroom door. She's doing well, he said, but you need to know there are 2. I stood there with my hat in my hand. 2, I said. Yes, he said. I only knew for certain this morning. I went in. She was in the bed, propped against the pillows, white with pain but present, completely present, her eyes open and finding mine the moment I came through the door. She had both hands pressed flat against the blanket, steadying herself. Cade, she said. I crossed the room and took her hand. Hers was cold. Mine probably was too. 2, she said. Doc told me. She looked at me. Are you afraid? She said. No, I said. Which was a lie, partly. But the bigger truth under it was real. Whatever came next, I was not going to be absent from it. I was going to be right here. She squeezed my hand. Good, she said. Me neither. That was also partly a lie. We both knew it. But we were the same kind of liar about that particular thing, which turned out to be important. They were born just after midnight. A boy first, then a girl. 11 minutes apart. Both small, weeks early, you can see it in them. The surprised thinness of a body that came into the world before it was quite ready. Doc Reser said they were strong for their size. He said it with enough confidence that I believed him, and I am not generally a man who believes things he wants to believe. I held the boy first. He fit in the crook of my arm with room to spare, and he had the dark hair and the faint wrinkled expression of someone who found the whole situation questionable, which I understood. Nora was watching me. What do you think? She said. She was exhausted, gray-faced, pulled thin by the hours, but her eyes were clear. I think, I said, that Galt has no idea. She laughed. Even then, even that tired, she laughed. We named the boy after my father, Walter. The girl we named Me, which had been Nora's mother's name. Walter and Me. It took about 10 minutes for Hector to take complete possession of both of them and begin an ongoing campaign to teach Walter to say his name as a first word, which Alina told him was idiotic and which he ignored entirely. January again. 1 year since Nora had come up the road in that too big coat with the loose trace chains rattling. I was fixing a fence post. The same south pasture line, always the same pasture. You can do everything right and some sections of ground just eat posts. The cold was the same kind of cold as the year before, that heavy January wait. But something was different. Nora came out across the field with a thermos of coffee. She had Walter on her back in the carrier she'd rigged from a blanket and 2 lengths of oilcloth, which he'd taken to with complete philosophical acceptance, his dark eyes watching the world go by from above her shoulder. Me was inside with Alina, who had appointed herself more or less permanently as auxiliary grandmother, and no one had argued. Nora came up beside me and handed me the thermos. I looked at her, the January light flat and clean on her face. The boy asleep now, his head dropped to the side, that absolute abandon of infant sleep. "Post giving you trouble," she said. "Same post," I said, "every year." "You could just fence around it," she said. "I could. But you won't." "No," I said. She leaned her shoulder against mine, careful of the baby, and looked out at the pasture. A roan heifer and her calf were working the far fence line, the smoke from the house chimney going straight up in the still air. "Mortgage," she said. "February," I said. "The payment in February is the last one." She was quiet. I felt her breathe. "What does that feel like?" she said. I thought about it. "Like something I've been carrying for a long time," I said, "and I keep reaching for it and it's not there anymore." She turned and looked at me. Close. That direct look, the one I'd learned to read, which meant she was thinking something true and deciding whether to say it. "You've been carrying more than the mortgage," she said. "Yes," I said. "I know." The boy shifted on her back, resettling, some small dream moving through him. "I didn't think I'd have this," I said, not explaining it. She knew what I meant. "Neither did I," she said. She put her hand against my chest. Just that. Flat against my coat, feeling whatever she was feeling through the wool, heartbeat maybe, or just the cold coming off the cloth, or just the fact of me standing there. I put my hand over hers, the same table, the same way. A year later and it was still the same gesture which felt right. "February," she said. "February," I said. There are things I know now that I didn't know a year ago. I know that a fence post set in frozen ground will not hold true until the ground thaws and firms around it. You can do everything right, and it's still going to lean if the frost pushes it. You've got to come back in the spring and check it again. I know that Galt sold his east parcel in the fall, not to me, to a young couple from Kansas, and moved his operation south toward the river. I heard about it from Hector. I didn't miss him. I know that Barren is a word for ground, not for people, and that the people who used it about Nora were wrong in the particular and wrong in the principle, and that Walter and Me, asleep in the house with the fire going and Alina singing something off-key in the kitchen, are the most straightforward possible evidence of that fact. But mostly what I know is this. I was 50 years from being done. 2 more post replacements, a good spring, a summer where the creek stayed in its bed. Hector's brother signed on full time. The mortgage paid in February on a morning so cold the ink took a moment to dry, and Magistrate Feld's clerk shook my hand across the counter and said *congratulations. Mr. Morrow and I walked out into the February street and stood there in the cold for a full minute with nothing particular to do. That evening, Nora put me in my arms. Me had started grabbing at things, fingers finding whatever was near, interested in everything, and sat across from me at the table, and the lamp was between us, and Walter was in the cradle by the stove making the small sounds of a person who has not yet decided whether to sleep. She was watching me with a look I couldn't quite name, not soft, not romantic exactly, something more honest than that. "What?" I said. "I'm glad I came up that road," she said. I looked at her. "You didn't know I lived here," I said. "No," she said, "but I got where I needed to get." Me had found my thumb and was holding it with both hands, that iron grip infants have. Walter settled in the cradle. Outside the February night, inside the lamp, the fire, the four of us. 47 years I'd been in this county, 30 of them working this land, and I'd been close to convinced that the second half of a man's life was just the first half, quieter, with more to show for the work and less reason to do it. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about that completely.